Hi everyone, my name is Desiree Warner. It is Friday, February 8th, 2019, and my task today is to follow up on an experiment that I started about 19 hours ago, and I want to give you some results of my findings. Firstly, yesterday, it was about 19 hours ago, I used two different microbes, the S. cerevisiae and the S. epidermidis, using three different carbohydrates to figure out if they were going to ferment, not ferment, or ferment with gas. Putting them in three different broths. These were actually a phenol red broth. So using 6 different tubes of the phenol red broth. So each microbe, let me explain the experiment. Each microbe was placed in a glucose. Well, each microbe was placed in one of 3, and then the other one was placed in one of 3. Then, using glucose, using Durham test tubes placed downward, and then, for example, this is the S. cerevisiae glucose. And then there's another one with the S. epidermidis glucose. There was another phenol red broth with the S. cerevisiae and fructose. And then another one in the S. epidermidis fructose. And then thirdly, there was a phenol red broth with the S. cerevisiae in the mannitol carbohydrate. And the S. epidermidis in the mannitol carbohydrate. So, adding the microbes to the different broths, we had to wait 19 hours. And, well, the microbes are to respond to the carbohydrates, and that was added to each of these test tubes. And my findings are such. But first, before I show you my findings, which you already saw, what I saw was, well, the phenol red broth was red. Just a few minutes of adding the microbes to the S. cerevisiae microbes to the broth, I saw some fermentation on the top, and but overall, all of my tests seem to have fermented, and I'm going to go through them with you. So this is the S. cerevisiae glucose. And there is, if you look carefully, there is a bubble. I can see a bubble in the Durham test tube. So that tells me that this is positive for fermentation based on the color. And there's some gas. So it's fermentation with gas. And that's for the S. cerevisiae in glucose. The S. epidermidis in glucose, it did ferment, but there was no gas. The S. cerevisiae with fructose fermented, and I see, yep, some gas. Some small bubbles, very small bubbles. By the way, this test was very specific as far as when we added the Durham test tube. We were told to make sure all the bubbles had escaped from the test tubes, because we wanted to get accurate results, to make sure that there were no bubbles, for fermentation. This one has no bubbles. This is the S epidermidis fructose. There were no bubbles in the Durham test tube. And this is the S. cerevisiae in the mannitol I saw one little bubble, so I see a little bit of fermentation. And with gas, fermentation with gas. And sixth one would be the S. epidermidis in the mannitol. And I see fermentation and gas. I see some bubbles. And that's it. So again, I just want to identify that I think the key thing to highlight here was for the one conducting this experiment to really make sure that once you place that test tube within, that Durham test tube within the phenol red upside down, we are to make sure that there were no bubbles in the test tube, that the bubbles had escaped. I just pretty much tapped on the bottom of it sideways to make the bubble escape, because you don't want to misconstrue bubbles from previous, being entered with bubbles from a product of fermentation. And that's it. So this is how I know what fermented. These are from yesterday. These are the glucose that we were supposed to add to the phenol red broth. And that's it. Again, here are my results. I'm going to summarize my findings, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much.